Our top story this morning, this Friday at UM's Denison Theater, the Montana Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on a case with national implications involving tax law, education, and religious schools. UM law professor Pippa Browdy said the question before the court is whether the Montana Constitution prohibits tax credits for donations to scholarship organizations that could ultimately go to religious schools.
The legislature was concerned that a provision in the Montana Constitution prohibits financial aid to religious schools. And so the legislature made sure to note that the law must be followed and the tax credit must be issued in compliance with the Montana state constitution.
Browdy said the parents of the students at the religious schools sued over the bill's constitutionality.
The department said, well, the only way we can interpret this is that religious schools aren't eligible for scholarships supported from these tax credits. And the parents of these children who go to religious schools argued that was impermissible by the Department of Revenue and that the law is constitutional under the Montana state constitution.
Browdy said the case has garnered national attention on the rights of religious schools to receive funding that would normally only be available to public schools. The public is invited to attend on Friday. The oral arguments will be streamed live starting at 9 a.m. through the Missoula Community Access Television. Missoula police arrested a man and woman from Billings last night after they led officers on a high-speed chase from the area of Phillips and Byron to Russell Street that finally ended at Tremper Shopping Center. Sergeant Jerry Odlin has details.
The vehicle fled southbound on Russell, and the officers gave pursuit. The vehicle was exceeding the speed limit and continued southbound on Russell, eventually turning into the shopping center near Russell and Kent Street. The driver and the passenger both exited the vehicle and ran from it, leaving the vehicle in gear. The vehicle struck an occupied vehicle in the parking lot. There were no injuries out of that minor crash, though.
Odlin identified the two suspects and the charges against them.
39-year-old Billings resident Joseph Waters was arrested for criminal endangerment, fleeing from or eluding police officers, possession of dangerous drugs, and numerous other charges. 35-year-old Billings resident Casey Zucconi was the female passenger, and she was taken into custody as well for obstructing a peace officer.
The two will appear in Missoula Justice Court later on this afternoon. Missoula police found much more than just a stolen car when they spotted one on Mullen Road last Friday. Police Public Information Officer Travis Welsh has more.
An officer discovered a vehicle in a parking lot located in the 3400 block of Mullen Road that had been previously reported stolen in the city of Billings. The officer watched the car for a while and observed a male and female come out to the car, were identified as 48-year-old William Bigby and 64-year-old Josephine Neary.
It turns out the two are related. Both received charges during the arrest.
It appears that Mr. Bigby is Miss Neary's nephew. The investigation revealed that Mr. Bigby was in possession of the vehicle, and also that in the vehicle were located dangerous drugs which were associated with the female. And as such, Mr. Bigby was arrested for the original theft of the vehicle, and Miss Neary was arrested for drug offenses.
The drug involved is methamphetamine, but it's unclear if the meth was purchased in Missoula or somewhere else. Montana Green Party officials say they sought the public's help in gathering voter signatures to qualify for the ballot, but they're unaware of anyone being paid to do so. Spokeswoman Danielle Breck responded yesterday to Montana Democratic Party allegations that a political firm with Republican ties conducted paid electioneering work for the Green Party without reporting to state regulators. More than 10,000 signatures were turned in last month in support of certifying the left-leaning party, which has historically appealed to people who otherwise might vote as a Democrat. Democrat officials allege advanced micro-targeting. I gathered 9,400 signatures in 19 days, and they want to find out who paid the Las Vegas-based company. And the Montana Democratic Party is courting and supporting candidates for local offices to capitalize on a renewed interest in politics and to create a bigger pool of candidates for legislative seats in future years. Nick Lockridge, coordinator of the Blue Bench Project, told the Lee newspapers of Montana that Democrats in Washington and Wyoming are looking at creating similar programs. Lockridge says he's been in contact with local Democratic Central Committees to help identify candidates for local offices. He says the Blue Bench Project wants to help those candidates feel comfortable running a campaign so they might seek a higher office someday. The long-feared trade war between U.S. and China escalated yesterday as tariffs on around 128 different commodities were imposed by China on U.S. exports. Montana State University professor and agricultural policy specialist George Haynes explains which Montana commodity he believes will be impacted. impacted.
Interesting day in agriculture, I think, is the Chinese have decided to retaliate against the other tariffs that have been applied to them by putting some tariffs. And I think most notably here, as of today, pork is probably the one product that's produced here in Montana, probably most heavily impacted.
The interesting thing about Montana pork, though, is that we just don't know how much is actually exported, and Haynes explains why not.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in Montana. The pork production in Montana here is really an issue for the Montana Hooterite colonies, and there's a little bit of other pork production that goes on here, but that's primarily where it comes from. You know, the reality of it is, whenever you have a tariff that's on any product, there's going to be less that's going to be, shipped out of the U.S., and so it's going to have some downward pressure on prices.
Many of the announced tariffs were at 15%, but if the trade war continues, it could change and even more products could be targeted. A Montana Sheriff's Office is investigating an apparent joyride through a town cemetery. The Billings Gazette reports the Sheridan County Sheriff's Office shared on Facebook. Someone drove over most of the town's graves on Sunday, Easter morning. The Facebook post says suspects entered the Plentywood Cemetery in a vehicle and, quote, proceeded to take a series of joyrides that covered most of the eastern half of the cemetery. A resident notified the sheriff's office of the damaged graves. The extent of the damage, not known. Our News Talk time now is 6:12.
Newstalk, KGVO.
Missoula's official weather station. Mostly cloudy skies today with a few morning showers. Afternoon highs will be in the mid-40s. Tonight, overnight low temperatures will drop to the freezing mark. We'll see a wintry mix of rain and snow on Wednesday. I'm meteorologist Brooke Foster for Missoula's KECI 13.